Gavin Cooney from the 42.e joins us in studio. There's a lot to get through. There's a certain name that continues to hover and loom large over Irish football. No matter what way we turn, like you work in online journalism, I work in online journalism. You mentioned Roy Keane, you see spikes in traffic and all that kind of stuff. This is manna from heaven for the likes of us for the next while, because as long as Sunderland draw this process out, there's chats to be had and pieces to be had about Roy Keane potentially getting back in the game.
Absolutely. Like if Oscar Wilde did end up in later life, ending up in online sports journalism, the line would be, there's no such thing as a bad Roy Keane story. All Roy Keane news is good Roy Keane news. And as a result, if you Google his name, like I Googled his name looking for an update on the potentially going to Sunderland story, you find a series of kind of has-been English footballers given their Roy Keane story on TalkSport, because it just gets clicks. And that's why I feel actually makes me feel sometimes sorry for Keane. And then if you watch the thing with Gary Neville, the overlap, the line that always jumped out at me is he keeps saying that reality is perception. Reality is perception. And he always talks about not playing the game, as in, not keeping certain journalists on side. You feed them scraps of stories and they kind of effectively help do your bidding, for want of a better phrase. He refused to do that. But he could never stem the tide of his own celebrity or popularity.
But in that's a game in itself. He's not playing the game, but he's playing a game.
In what game is he playing?
He's deciding to plough his own furrow and drop little nuggets where he can. Like one of the main things that's come out of the Roy Keane, for me anyway, the Roy Keane punditry era, is the glimpse behind the curtain that we've gotten more than once, let's be honest, and Sky are prone to do this, and I think they did it today, where they showed the softer side of Roy Keane, the bromance between himself and Micah Richards.
Hang on a minute now. So you're suspicious of the friendship with Micah Richards?
I'm not suspicious of the friendship. I do believe it's genuine.
But do you think Keane is playing a role there? That there's maybe I need to kind of lean into the banter, kind of curmudgeonly but nonetheless friendly. Yeah. Roy, curmudgeonly face with a heart of gold beneath it all.
Exactly.
You think he's happy to play a role with that?
I think. Well, I just think the fact that he got into punditry after being so sternly against it, he's decided. Micah Richards. Like, I feel bad for Ian Wright because we've forgotten about the romance that was there between Ian Wright.
Keane always ends up doing things he hates. He ended up working for the FAI.
That is a good point.
I know.
That is a good point.
It's just the contradictions in Keane that keep him so endlessly fascinating. My take on Roy Keane, because everyone has one, is that he refused to play the game that he talks about. He gave a great interview to David Walsh of the Sunday Times a few months ago, explaining why he wouldn't play the game, as in play the pure game with journalists and keep in and always get a job. It's just like someone gets sacked and then suddenly the papers have the same names on the back of the paper.
Alan Kirbishley, come on in.
Yeah, well, Kirbishley could have done playing the game a bit better, you know. R.I.P. Alan Kirbishley's managerial career. But he didn't do it because I always felt that Keane wanted to feel like he had earned something. And that was the thing throughout his career, that I think it might have been included in the David Walsh interview. The reason his shirt number at Manchester United was 16 was, according to Roy, it was outside 1 to 11, so he felt he always had to earn his place, and he always feels like, I don't know, maybe he didn't come through the traditional route in Irish football. Like, he had to go on the Fos course, went to Nottingham Forest at a much later age than most of the gilded talents of his generation, none of whom had the same career in the game. So I always felt that Roy always felt that he had to earn it and had to fight a little bit harder, and that he would only ever accept things on his terms. So I always felt like he's always had this kind of slight veil of contempt or disrespect for people who, Frank Lampard's lost 8 games. How's, maybe that's Frank's problem rather than, maybe it always this thing like, he's English, maybe he gets an easy ride. And I always felt like that was a problem with Keane's management, is that he could never really fully associate with players who were of far lesser quality than him, because maybe he felt that they had got themselves to a level in the game that they maybe didn't deserve to, which is all wrapped up in the contradictions of Keane.
Well, is that what makes this most surprising? Is that his name has popped up so closely to the Sunderland gig? It's not that his name has been floated out there. It's not somebody kite flying. It seems as if they have a very serious intent to talk to him about their managerial vacancy. They're not in the worst position considering where they are. They're third in the championship. Wigan have games in hand on them, granted, above them, but they haven't been doing too badly. The 6-0 loss to Bolton is, a bit of an aberration compared to what they've been doing so far in the season. So to see them go, all right, we want a young up-and-comer like Lee Johnson, all right, maybe that hasn't worked out. Their next port of call is somebody who hasn't managed on his own in 11 years.
I was surprised to see him linked with it, and that's why I think you should take it. I think that if he doesn't take, I mean, the reporting out of the journalists in the Northeast and the very respected and well-sourced journalists in the Northeast suggests that, Grant McCann was interviewed as a kind of a backup plan, as kind of a due diligence or, good governance on Sunderland's part, but it's Keane's job if he wants it. I think he has to take it if he was ever serious about getting back into management. This is... Keane had always been slightly self-deprecating, saying, on Sky after leaving the Nottingham Forest assistant job, was that, look, Real Madrid aren't going to come calling for me, as much as I would like it. This feels like as good a level as he's going to get back in. I know it's the top. I know it's League One. Like, it's hard to imagine Roy Keane even, watching games in League One, But Sunderland are a big, big club. They're effectively, in terms of size and in terms of following, in terms of footprint in local community, they're a Premier League side that has just been run dysfunctionally for years and years. And he has history there. He will be welcome back. And, the reporting suggests that it's a short-term gig. It's effectively bring Roy in there as a kind of a defibrillator to kind of get this thing up and running again. Look at the table. It's unlikely that they're going to get promoted automatically unless Keane does a brilliant job. I've no idea what kind of job he will do, but I would be surprised if he does a bad enough job to take them out of the playoffs. They have a decent cushion to the side who are slightly outside the playoffs. Sorry, I can't remember who they are off the top of my head. But given Sunderland, the quality of their squad relative to what's around them, he should be fine in terms of getting to the playoffs. And then, it's cup football to get into the Championship, and suddenly, you're a big, big club in the Championship, and you would say, that's probably the level that Keane could best have hoped for, based off the fact that he hasn't managed in so long. And we'll go back to reality's perception. The perception of his time as an assistant manager was not good, based off, Nottingham Forest was very short-lived. It's hard to judge off that. But with the Irish thing, it's so hard to, how do you quantify how well an assistant manager does? It's almost impossible. But you can talk about when he's doing a bad job, when there's stuff like the Stephen Ward WhatsApps, that paints a perception that Keane might argue is not fair, but then, at the same time he's kind of fatalistic about it and talks about, perception is reality. So I think if he doesn't take the Sunderland job, I don't know if he's ever going to go back into management.
Yeah, Championship clubs who have ambitions in the Premier League are starting to be a bit more clever in terms of who they go for, and we've seen appointments like Daniel Farke at Norwich down through the years. The people that have gone, like Valerian Ismail, hasn't worked out at West Brom, but certainly it shows a bit, left of the dial thinking from them. And they're like Thomas Frank at Brentford is I suppose is the ideal case. But the thing about Keane at Sunderland at Ipswich, there seemed to be a constant frustration there. Like, Ipswich, when he joined them, weren't in a great position. I don't think he left them in a great position either. I think they were 21st or something like that when he walked away in the Championship. But there was a certain frustration with him there. You could sense that he wasn't dealing with people who were ever going to be at his level, or he was ever going to perceive at his level, to use that term. You can contrast that with Sunderland. We were going through the squad just before we came on air. Has he got it within himself to get the best out of Lee Burge in goal, or Jordan Willis or Callum Doyle, or Bailey Wright, who playing centre half for them, has made 50 odd appearances.
Well, once he doesn't do with Lee Burge what he did with Craig Gordon, whom he spent £9 million on. Back in the time, I remember there's so many headlines. It's like, £9 million for a goalkeeper. Roy, are you mad? And now we're in the year of okay, Liverpool dropped 60 million on Alisson Becker, and it's the most normal and rational transfer ever held. But there was that story that, Keane tried to motivate Craig Gordon by effectively going in goals himself at training, putting the gloves on and diving and stopping shots, and look, I'm an old man, I can do it, why can't you? And I think he did express regret in the Roddy Doyle autobiography about that, so... The quote was, "I didn't think the keeper should be beaten from 25 or 30 yards. I think I lost Craig for a few weeks and maybe longer because of that. I could have lost $8,000. I was trying to generate a bit of banter, but I'd embarrassed and maybe belittled the goalkeepers. I hadn't meant to." It's gee, do you think? Yeah, and you'd assume that he, if he's reflecting on it on his book, you would hope that he has learned from it, and he will change. And people learn and people change. And I would believe that I would think that he believes he's capable of doing that, and we just get back to the reality is perception thing. People out there believe I can change, but it's a risk in other ways for Sunderland because he hasn't been a manager in 10 years, and we also there's other things I have no idea who his backroom team is going to be. We were discussing that because we were going through who was his number two when he was there beforehand, and we stumbled across the name Ricky Sprague. Oh god, yeah, Ricky Sprague, of course he was the number two, but he was really like a club man, exactly. But who would
who would formulate Keane's backroom team?
Yeah,
Who's he looking
Fraser
around?
wasn't there. Like, he wasn't like, so Gerrard, we're never really sure about the tactical genius of Steven Gerrard, but he's obviously an inspiring figure and a major personality. But he has that coach he brought from Liverpool's underage scene, Michael Beale, who's really highly rated, and Gary McAllister as well. So, and he's brought him from Liverpool to Rangers to Aston Villa. I mean, Keane was at Nottingham Forest. He understands how influential a number 2 can be. But in terms of, you know, like boots on the training ground, like really sophisticated training, etc. Maybe Keane is capable of that. I would get the sense that he's more of a kind of a hands-off overseer. Like, you know, he won't. I don't think he'll actually appreciate the comparison like Alex Ferguson was. But it's just like the risk element is not the fact that we don't know what Keane is capable of. We just don't know who he's going to have around him and things like that. And look, Sunderland will do interviews and find out who that is, etc. But I hope he takes it. I really do. I know, you know, people love him on Sky. I find him utterly compelling on Sky, but I watch Jamie Carragher and Gary Neville to learn more about the match. I watch Roy Keane to learn more about Roy Keane.
He's an entertainer.
Oh, absolutely.
He doesn't mean to be.
Yeah.
But he has, and that's I think what people will be thinking is that, is he too much of a media figure now to walk back into a dressing room and try and assert authority?
I don't know. I don't think so, because... But what do you mean by that in terms of too big a media figure? Like, people will know him?
People, not necessarily people will know him, but people are kind of in on the gag, almost. People know that he's this, like, you know, stern person in front of the camera who's going to give them pelters, but underneath it all, like this, like you mentioned there is that library of backstories that you can go to whereby he's, like, everybody's laughing about the stern Roy Keane. Like, there was one of his... I think it was one of his Ipswich players was telling a story about he was in charge of them for the pre-season tour, and wherever they were the last night of it, he let them go loose, and he just said, like, listen, nobody get arrested, nobody, you know, turn up too late tomorrow morning or taking the mick or whatever. And so he gets on the bus and everybody more or less is there on the bus, and he castigates them all. He says, you've got no character, look at this, look at you all turning up on time, being goody two shoes, like all being great, and there's one person missing. And the one person missing hops up on the bus and they're all like, oh, he's going to get praise now for being Roy's boy. And then one person comes up and he's like, what are you doing? You think you're, you know, Charlie Big Time coming up on here trying to, you know, show everybody else up, you know, you're finding a week's wages. So everybody kind of like knows that the Roy Keane thing is...
Well, I couldn't wrap my head. I mean, one of the things, I mean, Keane is so contradictory in many ways. Maybe we don't know him as we think we know him. But the one thing we do know about him is that he absolutely hates people being late. Like, that's his whole thing. Oh my word! So the fact that he's then, I mean, I couldn't. If I was a player, I would just not be able to figure him out if he's castigating us for being on time. I mean, that feels like, you know, strategic uncertainty, like unbalance these people at all times, make them sure of absolutely nothing and keep them on their toes.
I know every squad is different and every group of players is going to react to a different manager differently because, like, it's human chemistry.
Yeah.
But is, like, with Keane, like, is there a sense that people are kind of are trying to second guess him as a person, or him the character, or him, like, because he's that kind of figure now? It's not as if there is this massive, you know, tactical database that you can go and say, oh, well, he's going to, like when Thomas Tuchel came to Chelsea, we kind of knew what system Chelsea were going to play. When Klopp came to Liverpool, the same. Roy Keane coming in, you're essentially hiring a big money vibes man who's going to ask for heart and determination and running, and beyond that, like, you look at, we'll get to Celtic in a minute, but you look at what Ange Postecoglou has done in the short term at Celtic and managed to change the culture in footballing terms. Roy Keane's not going to do that. Yeah,
we don't think so. That goes down to, like, who's his number 2. Maybe he can, you know, bring in a coach that can do that, but we just don't know. But, like, I mean, this is why it's so interesting. If he takes that job, I have absolutely no idea what will happen. You know, he could bring them on this surge of great form and take them into the Championship through the automatic promotion places, or he can, you know, he could potentially fall out of the playoff places. And I don't know which would surprise me more, if either would surprise me.
Yeah,
absolutely no idea why it would happen. Which is why it needs to happen. I read stuff as like, well, would he give up his place on Sky, etc.? Sky would have him back in a heartbeat. He can go and come back, not a problem at all. I mean, Gary Neville went to Valencia and he came back without any issue. And I mean, Keane drives way more eyeballs than Neville. They would absolutely have him back.
It's going to be an interesting dynamic if it does happen, because as you mentioned there, they're in a playoff spot. They have a fairly comfortable cushion between themselves in third, and it's Plymouth who are occupying 7th at the minute. I think there's 7 points between them, and Plymouth do have a game in hand, so, like, it will be theirs to throw away. But the sheer dynamic of Roy Keane going to Accrington, going to Cheltenham, going to Shrewsbury, going to Lincoln City, going to Fleetwood Town, going to Morecambe and Crewe and Gillingham. It doesn't seem right.
Yeah, but these are the incongruities that are thrown up by the fact that he hasn't been a successful manager so far. And he's, he accepts it that Real Madrid aren't going to come calling. And he's turned a couple of jobs down. As far as I know, he was definitely interviewed for the Azerbaijan national team job, which would have made those two internationals last year a lot more interesting than they bloody well were. But, this is the level that he's at. But like you go away to Accrington, etc. But you're at home in front of 40,000 people, and it's a big. People talk a bit like it's a very amorphous term, like it's a big club.
No, it is a big club,
but it is big, and it goes to the Championship, and it's going to be one of the biggest in the Championship. So, I think Keane hasn't been a manager in a long time. He hasn't been a successful manager in an even longer spell of time. There's all this conjecture out there about his personality and how he is with people. For every kind of footballer that goes on TalkSport that says about, listen to my funny, angry Roy Keane story, there's 10 untold Roy Keane stories about how kind he is behind the scenes, but he just doesn't want to promote it, be it charitable goods, be it just being genuinely decent to people, because you hear these stories behind the scenes, but he just doesn't want to get out there. He doesn't want to play the PR game, So, I was listening to Ger this morning, and he was talking about, don't, your home is on Sky. Maybe it is, but this is the last chance we have to prove that. If this doesn't work out, then his home is on television, and that's fine. He's going to have a great television career. He will probably go on I'm a Celebrity eventually. That was my long-term prediction. But I would love to see Keane try management. I think this is as good a job as he could possibly have hoped for, giving the context of the career that has gone past. And I genuinely, if he does take it, I don't know anyone in Ireland who wouldn't want him to be a success.
I just want to hear. I want to be in the interview room. I want to see who he's promoting as his backroom team. I want to see what is 3, 4, 5 year vision for something.
Yeah, I would love for the 42 to next send me over on a bi-weekly basis and get the old death stare to kind of melt my soul again.
Well, that's what we're going to see again if this happens. Remember when 06 when you took over, there was a sudden smattering of Sunderland jerseys appeared around town.
Well, Sund Ireland was the whole thing. Now he did buttress it out by signing quite a lot of Irish players.
Connolly was there, Darryl Murphy was there, Ian Hart was there, Roy Delap was. We went through Liam Lawrence. Was there was a whole.
So one of the main sources of income for the League of Ireland for quite a while. It was great. we've been talking for so long about this off season about the poor fees that are coming to the League of Ireland. Maybe we just need
Sunderland,
Sund Ireland.
Well, let's stretch that out a little bit, because this off season in the League of Ireland, in terms of the fees and the transfers that are being made, is things are quite clearly moving in a different direction, because we're seeing players of an older vintage, and I say that with all due respect to 25-year-olds, going off to
I was one myself once.
I know, exactly. Georgie Kelly going off to Rotherham, obviously after proving himself in the league, and he's heading off to England. But then you've got the other end of the scale, whereby the likes of Carl Heffernan has gone off to AC Milan as a kind of a bridging loan thing. He might come back, he might not. Kevin Zeffy's already gone off.
It's great that someone has repurposed the bridging loan phrase in the Irish football folklore.
Exactly.
It was great. We needed someone to take that phrase.
Someone needs to take it back. Yeah, I wonder where it came up before. And then we've got James Abanku who's gone off to Udinese. Now, there's different scales involved in those transfers, because if we're led to believe what is being put out in by you lot in the media, is that Udinese are going to pay a hell of a lot of money for James Abanku because of the contract that was in place at St. Pat's, but the money that might come in for Cathal Heffernan for Cork City and AC Milan is far less. And with Brexit the way it is, and with the under 18 situation the way it is in terms of who can move, who can't, things are going to get very interesting for League of Ireland clubs. You add into that the amount of people who are coming in who are, like, I'm looking at St. Pat's signings and Dundalk signings, like the most latest one being Stephen Bradley coming in from Hibs, 19-year-olds looking to get more game time. There's this weird two-way street that has opened up between here in the UK and now obviously Europe as well.
Well, it's the Brexit thing is, like, under 18s you now can't go, in either direction. But if you're over 18, it's actually perversely easier to go, because we're in the common travel area. Actually, once you're over 18 and an adult, supersedes the FIFA transfer rules, which isn't the case for under 18, so between 16 and 18-year-olds. So, turn back, one of the reasons that we were so successful under Jack Charlton was because, and even up to Mick McCarthy's first stint in charge, was because these guys were going over and getting superb coaching from the best English coaches, but they were getting it because it was a much smaller... It's just a much smaller pond, And ever since the then the Premier League went truly global, signed like a £5 billion TV contract for 3 years in 2015. Suddenly it's this massive global league, and there's small little fish diving into the ponds and taking the plunge. Whereas now at over 18, it's actually shrunk again because of the points-based immigration system, because the Tories took back control. They now can't, like if an English club now can't go and pluck the best 18-year-old out of Brazil, who, if he hasn't played international football and doesn't satisfy the top, that points-based immigration system, if they haven't already, made an impact in the top 5 leagues. So it's actually perversely easier now to move if you're 18 in Ireland and maybe think you might make a bigger impact because you're making a slightly smaller pond. And it kind of perversely works the other way. I mean, I think it's possible that 4 of the 10 Premier Division sides this season in the League of Ireland will have goalkeepers on loan from UK clubs. Yeah. And it suits the UK clubs to send them here because not just goalkeepers but outfield players as well, because if you're sending to clubs, like send them to the top 4, they're going to get some European football. The style of play is generally looked upon quite well here. Kenny Shields had some interesting comments in Scotland to say that the style of play in League of Ireland is more continental than you will find in Scotland, and the standard at the top is decent. He said that Dundalk and Shamrock Rovers would hold their own in Scotland pretty well. They wouldn't break the old firm duopoly, but to be in a run with finishing ahead of Hearts in third. The other thing is, if you're sending a player on loan, the general minimum loan period is from one transfer window to another. So that's, if you're sending from one UK club to another, you're sending him in July and you can't get him back until January if it's not working out. In Ireland it's slightly different because it's the summer season and the windows are slightly different. So you can send a guy in March and then get him back in June or July if it's not working out.
But it's going to make for like the development of Irish players is going to become even more interesting, because they're going to be allowed to, you would think they're going to be allowed to bloom within the league and then prove themselves within adult football, and then
you would hope, and I think it's partly happening. Like the average age, I found this startling, the average age of a player in the Premier Division in Ireland last year was 25.4 and it was 28.4 3 years ago. So it's dropped by 3 years in 3 seasons, which is a fairly prodigious drop, And I think there's only 8 or 9 top divisions in Europe with a lower average age than the League of Ireland. That's probably going to get even younger, because of things like Brexit and of the fact that, if you're in the League of Ireland academy and you finish at under 19 level, next stop senior football. Like there's no 23 league, there's no bridging league between that, which isn't necessarily a criticism, because the under 23s league in England is, if you talk to people in terms of, if you're going to treat the under 23s league as a serious league for development, is effectively a kind of a waste of time, I mean, especially for elite players at 17, 18, 19 coming out of that level.
Yeah, Ali Regba is the one that jumps out at us this week, because Ali moved from Bohemians in 2019, I want to say, and I think hopes were very high for him. Like, he was already playing under 19 football for the Republic of Ireland. He looked like somebody who was going to be fast tracked in a way, I guess, that people look at Ross Tierney now, or people look at Dawson Devoy perhaps. This guy is going to be in, a championship club or a Premier League club in a couple of years, and just like the wheels never got turning over there, and he's now gone off to find his fortune in Algeria, and that's fine and best of luck to him. But you kind of would have hoped that he'd progress by here. But it's incumbent then upon the clubs to have their coaching strategies and setups at their optimum. And I'm not just talking about Rovers and Dundalk. It's going to have to go down to Shells and Finn Harps and Limerick and Treaty United. But and then for the FAI to actually have a hand in this as well. Because it's now really incumbent upon them to look after their younger players in a way that they haven't been able to or wanted to previously.
This is the critical piece, and we talk about Brexit being an opportunity. It is a difficulty initially to cut off that route. There's doing a piece for the 42 last weekend, an amazing stat from a FIFA report on the transfer market from the years 2011 to 2020. The highest exporter of footballers abroad, footballers aged 16 to 18, the highest in the world in absolute terms, is the Republic of Ireland, which is extraordinary, and they're nearly all going to Britain, so that's cut off. So the two options are, you can still go to the continent. Cathal Heffernan can go to AC Milan at the age of 16, or else you can stay here. And the opportunity is that if you keep guys here for another 2 years put them on professional contracts, invest in them, invest in their education, give them decent money. They can make an impact in your first team. We've seen these players like James Abankwah make an impact in the Pats first team. He was on he played the last 40 minutes of the FAI Cup final. And now he's going to earn.
And look like an adult in doing it. There's no sense that he was an 18, 19 year old.
He's very, very good. I mean, he's from Longford as am I. He's going to be. He's now a Banco now is going to fulfil the criteria and fulfil the dream of becoming the first Longford man to play in Serie A.
Which you thought was going to be yourself for some.
Me and former Taoiseach Albert Reynolds, we've both failed.
Albert was in with the chance, to be fair, but he thought the promoting game is probably a bit better for him. Dog food.
He felt he had some kind of public calling, and in many ways, maybe listener, maybe did I. So did I. But sorry, I got sidetracked there. But if you invest in these guys, then the opportunity is that you get proper transfer fees for them, and that I know people can talk about clubs demanding better transfer fees, and it perceive them as greedy. It's not really, because that's money that gets invested back into the game. Yeah. Like Graham Gartner was on OTB Saturday with John Duggan and Dan and Shane Keegan, and he explained that part of the money from Gavin Bazunu went into building an indoor facility in which all the Rovers academy teams can use. So that's the opportunity, and it's possible to create this virtuous circle. We're a long way from it yet.
Yeah, a lot of the Doherty money for Bowes went into training facilities as well.
Yeah,
it wasn't just
completely out of DCU. But we're a long way from it. The money coming in 2021 was decent, better compared to previous years. I think FIFA was casted in dollars. I think it was something like $4 million that came into the League of Ireland in transfer fees in 2021. Now I was trying to figure out that money. I think it might be add-ons, part of maybe the Bazunu deal. Yeah. 2020 was $700,000, which is a third of the Georgian League. It just goes to show how pitiful the money coming into the league is. And we're not getting any TV money either.
Well, they're caught between two stools. And we've seen more clubs put out multi-year deal press releases for certain players. Yeah. Now, that's 2 years, perhaps, maybe 3. In certain cases, it's 4 if you're Derry City. But those are rare. And because of finances and because of budgets, they're not able to have anything beyond that. And if you're not able to have anything beyond that, then your players are going to be out of contract. And if they're out of contract, they go for free.
Yeah, and look, there are other clubs that listen to this, and people involved in clubs will be annoyed to portray it as it could all be fixed if the clubs just invested money. Clubs want to invest money and they often don't have it. And the second is, they have, for want of a much better phrase, assets like exciting, talented young players. But the exciting, talented young players have agents who insist on release clauses. Okay, I'll sign a professional contract with you, but the release clause is going to be low, high 5 figures, low 6 figures, and is that really worth your time? So I think clubs offering education, offering a long-term investment in young talent from the age of 15 or 16, etc., up until they're 18, and just show to the player and their family that they're serious about developing them, and not just developing them as a player, developing them as a person. So that's where the education piece comes into it.
Yeah, it's going to be a big couple of years, and hopefully there'll be some direction from the FAI in those terms.